Let me welcome Professor Kishore Mehbubani, one of our distinguished scholars in Southeast Asia and a friend of India as well. Uh, Kishore wrote an article in the Financial Times on why India should be a member of the Permanent Security Council and to suggest that the UK could relinquish its seat if in the event that India is not. Now, this is since it has not been using its veto power since 1989. How can do you think India can approach the UK on this ground that you have not used your veto power and hence you are?
I mean, the founding fathers of the UN created the veto for a functional reason. They wanted to make sure that the great powers of the day were embedded in the UN, and the veto was the incentive for embedding them in the UN, and therefore they would not do what they did with the League of Nations when the United States didn't ratify the League of Nations, and the League of Nations collapsed. So that's the functional reason for the veto.
Okay, I get your point. Why do you believe that the UK should consider ceding its permanent Security Council seat to India? And how realistic is this in today's political scenario?
The UK is no longer an independent global great power. I mean, it's a nice, good-sized, mid-sized state, but it hasn't used its veto since 1989 because it knows, by the way, that if it uses the veto, the rest of the world will wake up and say, "Who are you? Why are you doing this?" They're very smart. They know that their veto will immediately lead to people questioning them. And functionally, I mean, to be brutally frank, functionally, the UK doesn't have an independent foreign policy from the United States of America.
Kishore, you remember, there was a saying once, which was probably a statement of fact, that the sun never sets on the British Empire.
Yes. Well, I mean, it's a bit sad that the UK is no longer among the top 5 economies in the world. Its share of the global GNP is going to progressively diminish. India is going to increase.
No, Kishore, in my opinion, they made a blunder by exiting EU, which they all sort of realized. I think Cameron just played a wild card, little knowing that he will lose. I suppose Boris Johnson was a very strong force behind Brexit.
I think both David Cameron and Boris Johnson did a lot of damage to the United Kingdom by both permitting and encouraging Brexit.
To look at the historical context between UK and India, particularly the legacy of the British colonialism, is a sensitive topic. How do you think this history influences the debate around the Security Council reform?
It's not a sensitive topic at all. I mean, the facts and evidence of British colonial rule cannot be contested in any significant way. And it is true, as Shashi Tharoor has documented, that in many ways, India suffered as a result of British colonial rule. So it's actually very good that the former colonies are not demanding reparations from their former colonial masters, and no point doing so. But one way in which the British can close an unhappy chapter with India is to cede its Security Council seat to India. And it makes perfect logical sense because, there's already an American veto in the UN Security Council. The British can't add to it. Whereas if India joins the UN Security Council, it will represent the world of tomorrow. And remember, the West makes up 12% of the world's population, and the rest makes up 88%.
Kishore, do you remember the last election to the International Court of Justice? India beat Britain. And this is the first time that there is no British judge in the International Court.
Well, that's a sign of the times. And besides, Britain can continue to make a meaningful contribution to the world. And indeed, by liberating the British from the UN Security Council, they will have less reason to be supplicant to the United States and be more capable of providing America, a good friend, independent political advice. It's a win-win outcome.
Just one last question. How do you think that India's permanent membership in the Security Council would reshape global governance, especially in the context of representing the global South? I mean, India is not the only representative of global South. China probably is much bigger because of its deep pockets, but we do
Well,
have some intellectual support from the global South.
yeah. Well, I think, it will make a huge difference because if you look at the UN Security Council, the West provides 12% of the world's population, but they have 60% of the permanent membership seats of the UN Security Council. So if India joins, frankly, it will create a rebalancing between the West and the rest. But that's only the beginning, by the way, because there are other institutions. Like, for example, there's this crazy rule that says to become the head of the IMF, you must be a European. To become the head of the World Bank, you must be an
Is it
American.
a rule or is it just a convention which is being followed blindly?
It's a rigged election.
Okay.
And the voting, as you know, the voting shares of the Europe is still hugely overrepresented in the IMF. So they have to cut down their voting share in the IMF. But this is just another example of the resistance of the West to transforming global governance and accepting the new global realities.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Kishore. It was very nice talking to you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate having me on.